Hi, this is Alyce Faye. We have an extremely special guest today. We have Miss Carol Burnett, a comedic icon. Hi, Carol.
Hello, Alyce.
Tell me a little bit about your early life. Where did you come from?
Well, I was born in San Antonio, Texas. And my mother and my dad moved out to California to try to get into the Hollywood scene. Mama wanted to be a writer, and Daddy went with her. So I was left with my grandmother.
I read this. I mean, your father was a rather sweet alcoholic.
Yes, he was. If anything, he got sweeter when he drank. You know, he was one of the sweetest, kindest souls I've ever known in my life.
Now, with your grandmother, though, did you listen to the radio?
We did. We listened to the radio. We listened to Jack Benny.
Hey, Bud. Bud.
Huh?
Got a match?
Yes, I have one right here.
Don't make a move. This is a stick-up.
What?
You heard me.
Mister, put down that gun.
Shut up. Now, come on. Your money or your life? Look, Bud. I said your money or your life. I'm thinking it over.
We used to listen to mystery things, like I Love a Mystery with Jack, Doc, and Reggie. And if anybody's old enough out there to remember. Oh, I used to love Let's Pretend. They would act out fairy tales on the radio every Saturday morning, and that was the one I
So you started your acting skills early.
Well, I really didn't. I never thought I'd get into this business at all.
Did you sit around and sing, or
We lived in a one room with pull-down Murphy bed.
really expensive rent over there?
Yeah, about $30 a month. And my mother lived down the hall, but we'd always be together. And Mama played the ukulele, and we would sing.
What did you sing?
We would sing songs like Carolina in the Morning. I remember that. Mama would always take the hard harmony part. My grandmother would sing the third, and I'd do the lead. And so we'd do Carolina in the Morning, I'll Get By, That Old Feeling. We'd sit around the table. It was
So you didn't stand up when you were singing?
No, we'd just sit, and I remember there was an oilcloth on the table.
Yes. Oilcloth's a big thing.
Oilcloth on the
especially
table.
in Texas.
Yeah. Mama and Nanny argued a lot, and it was usually over money.
Yeah.
So the best times were when we would all sing together.
Laura, comedian, when did that begin to form? Was it that early, or?
No. We would see my grandmother and I, she'd save up enough money. It cost me 11 cents and her 26 cents to see second run double features. So we'd go see about 6 to 8 movies a week. And then I'd come home and I'd play the movies. I'd act out the movies with some of the kids on the block. My best girlfriend, Isla Mae, and I would be Betty Grable and June Haver. My cousin, who's a beautiful girl, we were the same age. We'd see the Tarzan movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For something.
She naturally played Jane. So that's how I learned to do the Tarzan yell. But I didn't ever think of being a performer until I got to college.
So
Roller
you're in
skates.
high school, and,
I'm a nerd.
oh,
The nerd. I was very quiet. I had got good grades. We had this little nerdy group, you know.
You were a
and
good girl.
Then there were the gorgeous girls who dated the football players and stuff, you know. And then
I was the one the football players wanted to play football with.
hello. You and I are kind of cut from the same cloth. I wanted to be an Olympic runner, and my grandmother wouldn't let me work with the gym teacher after school because she said, that's bad for the heart.
You also wanted to go to university, didn't you?
I certainly did. I wanted to go to UCLA. I was editor of my school paper at Hollywood High because Mama pushed that. And I wanted to go to UCLA and study journalism. And but my grandmother said, we can't afford it. And the tuition at that time was $43. Well, that was a fortune.
You told me something in the car coming here, and I hope you don't mind. You said you actually saw yourself.
Yes. That happened a few times in my life, I would say maybe 4. And I knew I was going to get to go to UCLA. How? I didn't know, but I saw myself on campus. And I knew somehow it would happen. So every morning I would look out of our little apartment door across the lobby to the mail slots, the little pigeonhole mail slots. And it was my little duty to get the mail if there was something in our slot. Oh, and my grandmother said, you should go to secretarial school. college is for rich people. We can't afford $43. So this one morning, I looked out the front door, and there was a letter in our pigeonhole. And I went across the lobby. I walked across the lobby and got it. Had my name typed on it with the address and a 3-cent stamp that had not been canceled, so it hadn't been mailed. It just had been stamped. I opened it up, and out fell a $50 bill. To this day, Alyce, I don't know where that came from. And that was my ticket to UCLA. I'd never belted in my life, by that really singing out loud, real loud. And I had a pretty loud voice. And he said, well, I'm doing a scene from Guys and Dolls. I'm doing Nathan Detroit. Would you do Adelaide? And I said, what is that? He said, well, she has to sing a song called Adelaide's Lament. And I said, sing alone? And he said, well, you don't have to sound good because this character in this song has a cold. So I thought, well, that's good. So if I hit a clam, I can go, sniffle and make it sound like I did it on purpose. And so we did the scene in front of the class, and the response was terrific. I just felt like I wasn't a nerd anymore. And some of the big people on campus the next day would come up and say, would you come and have lunch with us on the lawn and stuff? And it just kind of started to happen. And
So you became accepted.
I did, and a musical comedy, I thought, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to go to New York. I want to be Ethel Merman or Mary Martin and sing on Broadway. And
But how were you going to get to New York?
I didn't even tell my mother and grandmother until after. This has been going on for over a year. Finally, I invited them to a show I was doing, and they saw me do a scene for Manny, Get Your Gun, and they were very proud. And then I said to Nanny, I want to go to New York. Well, how are you going to get to New York? And I said, I don't know, but I see myself there. It was the same thing again. I knew it would happen. I just didn't know how. So
She was really special to you.
Oh, she was a hoot. She was a character. She was born in Arkansas. I didn't find out till years later that she'd been married 6 times.
What?
Yeah. Oh, she was a caution. Yeah. I have to tell you, when she died at 81, she had a 40-year-old boyfriend who was a jazz musician in Redondo Beach.
I'm impressed.
So was I.
I'd like a toy whip. In fact, you've got one. What happened to me?
I think it's in the genes. I don't know.
So we're not going to go to New York then.
Yes, we are. I just knew it. And so our class had put together, about 9 of us, had put together scenes from musical comedies. And our professor asked us to perform these at a party. And he said, my wife and I are going to be there, and I'll grade you. You'll be the entertainment at this party. It's a very kind of posh thing in San Diego, black tie affair. So we all went down there, and I did my scene for Manny, Get Your Gun. And I was at the hors d'oeuvre table, and I was putting hors d'oeuvres in my purse to take home to my grandmother, and there was a tap on my back, and I thought, I am busted. Stealing hors d'oeuvres, right? And this man and his wife were standing there, and they had been in the audience, and they were very complimentary, and the man said, so what do you want to do with your life? I said, well, someday I want to go to New York and be in musical comedy. He said, why aren't you there now? Well, I can't afford it. I thought, well, what is he talking about? He said, I'll lend you the money. And I kind of swallowed one of the hors d'oeuvres, and his wife said, no, he means it. He said, you be in my office next week at 9 a.m. He had an office in La Jolla, and we'll talk about this. So I got a ride down there the next week, scared to death. So I walked into his office. He's behind this huge desk. I think it was a Vicuna rug. And he sat there. He said, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lend you $1,000 now.
Now, listeners, that was a fortune back then.
He said, now here are the stipulations. If you can, you pay it back in 5 years, no interest. Number 2, you never reveal my name. Number 3, you use this money to go to New York on. And number 4, if you're successful, you will help other people out.
Have you ever told his name?
No.
Good for you.
No. So I cashed the check so that we could buy gas to get back. I was embarrassed. And I had all this money, and I threw it on the Murphy bed, and I thought my grandmother was going to have a heart attack.
Oh.
And I explained it to her, and she said, oh, look at what we can do with all this. And I said, Nanny, I have to go to New York because that's what he gave it to me for. And so I dropped out of UCLA in my second year, went to New York.
But weren't you working?
Yes, I ushered for Warner Brothers Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. It was kind of short-lived. It was one summer, and I was working full-time because it was summer vacation. We had these harem outfits at that time with the pantaloons and epaulets on our shoulders and fez hat, and we had this crazy manager. He was very strict, and so I was called the spot girl, and that meant I stood in the middle of the lobby, and he would tell me on that spot, in an amber spotlight, to direct the people. Aisle 2 straight ahead, or the stairway to your right, or so forth. Well, this one night, I was on aisle 2. Mm-hmm. This couple came in, and we were showing Strangers on a Train, which was one of my favorite movies in the world. I was in love with Robert Walker. So now, this is a Hitchcock movie. You don't go in the last 5 minutes of a Hitchcock movie because it spoils it for you. So this couple came in, said, we want to sit down. I said, oh, please, just wait. Get some popcorn. Get a drink of water. It's a Hitchcock film. I want to sit down. The manager came over. He said, what's going on here? She won't sit us down. She won't let us sit. He said, Burnett did this thing across his throat with his finger. He said, you're fired. And he ripped off my epaulets.
He ripped off your epaulets.
I was drummed out of the Corps. Now, the nice part of this, years later, when they asked me where I wanted my star on Hollywood Boulevard, it's in front of that theater.
Quite right, too.
It's right there today.
And I hope he's still alive and he has to walk over it.
I don't know.
Did you drive?
No
train.
I had the $1,000, and then by the time I had to have 2 wisdom teeth pulled, I had to get so that cost some money from out of the $1,000. Airplane ticket. I bought a couple of new blouses and skirts and a little suitcase and stuff. So by the time I got on the plane, I had something like a little over $400.
So where were you going to live?
I had no idea. That's how stupid I was.
Oh, that's good.
I was on the plane. Mm-hmm. It was like I lived in the movies. And so I thought, well, things will just happen. I'll be all right.
Well, they all had happy endings then, didn't they?
They totally did. And I was into Mickey and Judy. And, I'll just land on Broadway and somebody will say, hey, you want a job? Uh-huh. Oh, on the plane, I was looking at the New Yorker, and there was an ad for the Algonquin Hotel. And I thought, that's where the round table was. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, I'll go there. So I got off, took a bus into New York, walked to the Algonquin Hotel.
You didn't tell me this. That's
found
amazing.
it, and got a room. Well, the cheapest room was $9 a night, and I thought, oh my God, our rent was $30 a day. So I thought, oh no, I'm going to be broke. So I check into this room, and I started to cry. And I promised Nanny I would call Collect to let him know I got there. So Nanny got on the phone. Mama got on the phone. My little sister got on the phone. They even put the parakeet on the phone. Come home. What are you doing there? And I started crying. I don't know. She said, but I'm supposed to be here. I just know it. I hung up, and I'm queer for rain. It started to pour. Thunder, lightning, which made me feel better. I turned on the radio in the hotel room, and it was a hurricane coming up. Hurricane Carol.
You're kidding.
No. Look it up. I thought, I'm okay. I'm supposed to be here.
That is amazing. Hurricane Carol in 1954. Mm-hmm. I am astounded. So everything was going to be fine.
I wasn't crying anymore. I just thought, okay, now I've got to figure out what to do next because I sure couldn't afford that $9 a day. So I had one phone number in my purse that belonged to a girl that I had known at UCLA, and she'd come to New York the previous year. I didn't know her that well. She'd been in one of the musical comedy classes, but I knew her, so I called the number. Hello, I'm calling Eleanor Eby. Oh, just a minute, Ellie, what? I hear all these female voices. Hello, Ellie, it's Carol Burnett. Oh, my God, you're here. Where are you? I told her. She said, get out of there. Are you crazy? You got to come over here where I am. Where are you? I live at the rehearsal club. What's that? It was a brownstone in the West 50s that was for, young ladies interested in the theater, all very proper, $18 a week room and board.
2 nights at the Algonquin.
Right? I got up there, and she introduced me to the woman who kind of ran, Miss Carlton was her name, and she interviewed me, and she said, okay, you can live here, but the rules are no men above the parlor, and that you must actively pursue a career in the theater. You can have a part-time job, but I want you to know you have to go and try to see agents and do auditions and so on. Yes, of course. So she put me in the transit room with 4 other roommates. So there are 5 women in one room with one closet.
That's a hen house.
Oh, I was fine. I mean, I had a cot and a dresser and my trunk at the bottom, or my suitcase at the bottom of the bed. When I left UCLA, they gave me a party, bon voyage, and they said, what are you going to do when you get to New York? I said, I'm going to be in a Broadway show, and it's going to be directed by George Abbott.
Oh, good.
I saw that. So I'm sitting there one night in the transit room, and all my roommates are out on dates. It was a Saturday night, and it was raining. And I looked in the paper, and Pajama Game was playing, which was a big hit, directed by George Abbott. He was
Man, wasn't
the
he?
musical comedy director on Broadway, and he was always called Mr. Abbott. I felt that I could go there because a friend of mine knew somebody who was in Pajama Game. He'd been an extra in some movies, and he knew Eddie Foy Jr., who was one of the stars of the Pajama Game, and said he was a nice guy. So I thought, I'm going to go and meet Eddie Foy Jr. and ask him for advice. So I put on my raincoat, trudged down to the theater where Pajama Game is playing. It's just about a little bit before 11 o'clock when the curtain would come down. Raining like you wouldn't believe. I knocked on the stage door.
Just knock 3 times and whisper low that you and I were sent by Joe. Then strike a match and you will know you're in Hernando's hideaway.
Pops, the old guy, opens the door and says, what are you doing? I looked like Ann Baxter in All About Eve. I was just drowned. He said, get in here. What are you doing here? I said, well, I'm here to see Eddie Foy. He said, you know Eddie? I said, I'm from California. Oh, okay, come here. So I hear this clap, and I think it's a thunder, but it was the applause. I see the stars running towards their dressing room after they'd taken their bow, and Eddie Foy Jr. was running by. Now, Eddie Foy Jr. was the comedic relief in that, and he was an eccentric dancer. He was one of the 7 little Foys, and he's raised in vaudeville. He kind of sang. He was a comedian. He stole the show. And so...
a bit like you, really.
So he had this wonderful part. So Pops said, this kid wants to see you. So Eddie Foy comes over. He says, yeah, okay, what? What can I do for you? He's wiping his neck with his towel. I said, well, Mr. Foy, a friend of mine worked with you in a movie and said you were very nice, and I just want some advice because I go to these agents' offices and they say, well, let us know when you're in something, but I can't get in something unless I have an agent. It's really impossible. He said, well, what do? Do you sing? I said, well, I'm loud. He said, do you dance? I said, no, sir, I'm not a dancer. He said, okay, you sing loud, you can't dance, and you can't read music. What do you think you can do? I said, well, I could never, ever be as good for the chorus because they're really good. So I guess I'll have to have a featured role.
You said this to Eddie Foy.
Talk about being naive and stupid. I am so grateful to this day that he didn't choke on his own laughter. He just kind of looked at me, but I guess it hit home because that was his career. He couldn't read music. He wasn't a trained dancer. He had to have a featured role.
You'd hit home.
I guess so. So he took my phone number and he called me the next day at the rehearsal club. And he said, here's my agent's name. Go see my agent. So I went in with my UCLA scrapbook of reviews, showed it to the agent, and I said, so what can I do? He said, well, let me know when you're in something. He said, go put on your own show. I said, okay. So I went back to the rehearsal club, got all the girls together. There were about 25 of us. I said, let's put on a show, like Mickey and Judy in the movies. We did. We wrote it ourselves, and we sent out invitations to every agent and producer in town, a penny postcard, said, this is your ticket. We got the board of directors of the rehearsal club gave us $200 to rent this Carl Fisher concert hall for 2 nights, and people showed up.
Now, did you sing?
I sang Monotonous from New Faces of 52, but it was a sexy song that Eartha Kitt sang, where she was in these tight Toreador pants and very sexy, going from one chaise lounge to another. So I did it as this terrible-looking housewife with curlers in her hair and 3 broken-down kitchen chairs, singing how boring and monotonous my glorious life was. And it was very funny, and 3 of us got agents.
And then your career really took off, didn't it?
I started to get work.
We could talk about all of your successes. I went on the internet. I mean, there's page after page after page. Johnny Carson, Jack Parr, Jack Benny, your hero, Jimmy Stewart,
Yeah.
your hero. You met them all.
Yeah.
They became your friends.
Yeah.
This little girl. We could do that. But I really would like to discuss something else that may be difficult for you, but it was important to me when I heard about your life. You had 3 daughters.
Yeah.
And at some point during this time, I think someone asked you to write about your life.
Well, this was before.
Before.
Yeah, I did. I wrote an autobiography mainly about Nanny and Mama and me and my growing up. And Random House was interested in what really released me as a writer was a friend of mine who was an author suggested that I make it a letter to my 3 daughters.
I see.
And that totally opened me up. And the book actually did very, very well.
Tell me about your daughters.
Well, Carrie was the oldest. She actually could do just about anything. She was quite lovely. She was funny. She could write. She directed. She starred in a few movies. She sang. She wrote music. She did a whole lot of stuff. My second daughter, Jody, whom I named after my dad, she's got an improvisational group. My youngest has a great set of pipes, but what she wants to be is a counselor in rehab. Carrie, in 1997, called me and she said, Mom, you know that autobiography you wrote? Why don't we, just for the fun of it, do a play, write a play? I said, Carrie, we don't know how to write it, but she said, well, let's just try it. Now, we never got in the same room together. She had a little cabin in Colorado, and I was in L.A., and we would talk on the phone, and then we would fax back and forth, and she'd take a scene here, and I'd take a scene here, and we plotted it out, and so forth. We had about 100 pages, and we showed it to a person we knew who was a theater lab workshop at Sundance. We were accepted in the theater lab there to work on our play. And we did. So it was kind of coming along, and people were starting to read it and get interested in it. And then we did a workshop in New York, and a couple of hot young directors were looking at it. We didn't know who to show it to, so I called Hal Prince, the wonderful.
Now, Hal Prince goes all the way back to the
Pajama Game. He was one of the co-producers. And so he's a friend, and I said, this is something Carrie and I have been doing, and we don't know these directors, and he'd worked with both of them. He said, well, let me read it, and I'll give you my opinion about which director to go for. About 3 days later, he called. He said, I don't want to push myself on you guys, but I would love to direct this. Well, that was like, hello, give me the
Let
moon.
me work with
I've
you,
got
please.
the moon. We were very excited. So we worked on it quite a lot with Hal. Carrie, in 2001, was diagnosed with lung cancer.
Did she smoke?
Yeah. And she called me from Colorado. And I said, get out here. It was tough. She was in and out of the hospital a lot. And it looked hopeful because the tumor had shrunk and they were going to then try to operate on it. But then it went to the brain. Yeah. So I'll tell you about her humor. She had to go back into the hospital the last time. And they called me, and I got there around 5 a.m. after she'd been admitted, and she was kind of asleep. And I just sat by the bed, and she opened her eyes, and I made this weak joke. I said, so, you had to come back to the hospital, huh? And she said, I miss the food.
I love that. As a parent, you always expect your children to outlive you.
It's not supposed to happen that way. But we continued to kind of work on the play together. After she died, I got such mail from people I didn't know who knew her. She'd been in the National Company of Rent and had done a lot of stuff. She was quite a performer. And the nurses, I had 3 letters from 3 different nurses who said that she cheered them up when they would come in to take care of her because she was funny. My husband and I just a couple of years ago, we were in New York and we were coming out of the theater looking for a cab, and this young man stops me. He said, I have to tell you, your daughter saved my life. I said, what? He said, I was in the National Company of Rent with Carrie, and I was doing drugs and stuff, and she was the only one who ever got through to me, and I'm alive today because of her. Oh. She's touched so many people. She did a movie called Tokyo Pop when she was 25. She was the star of it. She was the only, as they call, gaijin in the movie. And it has become this kind of cult classic over in Tokyo. And Anaheim University over there shows this movie to Americans coming over for the first time to Tokyo because it really, her performance and her character lays into how people feel when they are in Tokyo for the first time. She played a rock singer who goes over to Tokyo to be a hit. And as a result, they have started a $100,000 scholarship in Carrie's name.
That's wonderful. It was a very difficult time in your life, Carol, but fortunately, you had someone by your side.
Yes, I did. I had my husband, Brian.
And once again, there was some rain.
That's right.
Tell me.
Well, he loves rain. And so, but when we were trying out our play, Hollywood Arms, every time on opening night when we were trying it out in Chicago, it rained. And Brian went out with a styrofoam cup and got the rain and poured it into a water bottle and later had it put into a perfume bottle for me. It's got the dates on them. Then when Carrie died, she was cremated, and so we have her ashes in different places. And the one place she absolutely loved was Colorado. There was this big hill where there was this tree in Gunnison, Colorado. And so I said, okay, we're going to take part of her ashes and take them up there. The whole town turned out. They adored her so. Now, we're crawling up this mountain. They'd had a drought for 4 months. We were going to bury the ashes at 2 o'clock. At about 5 minutes to 2, the sky opened up. You wouldn't believe the downpour. Now, Carrie was queer for rain, too. It was like, oh, my God. And we all had to scramble back to our cars so we wouldn't get struck by lightning. And we had to wait. And Jody said, Mama, Carrie's here.
Is there any song that reminds you of Carrie and Brian? Or
one of my favorite songs is Here's That Rainy Day. I love that song.
Maybe I should have saved those leftover dreams. Funny, but here's that rainy day.
That one is my main one. I love Gershwin.
We're having an interesting fact-gathering time with Carol here. We've been talking about Brian.
Yes.
Now, tell me about Brian.
Well, Brian is a fantastic musician. He is the personnel director of the Hollywood Bowl. He's been the drummer for the Hollywood Bowl for 15 years. So being the contractor, he also hires the musicians. And he also does the same thing. He contracts the musicians for the Pantages Theater, all the musicals that they show there. So he's got a double whammy of a job, and he's such a drummer. I mean, he's classically trained, of course.
Well, now, what kind of music do you all listen to together? I mean,
everything. My girls all grew up watching me do musical comedy stuff, you know. And Brian loves it. And we also we got quite a collection of movies. And he's a throwback. He knows all the old movies that I saw when I was a kid, and he loves them. So we would do that. And we're also nuts for the crossword puzzles.
Carol Burnett, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop.
Well, I love being with you.
Thank you so much. It meant a lot to me. See you.
I done what on that. It tastes fishy.
Try it, eh? Salty doesn't taste fishy.
I say it does taste fishy.
I'm telling you, it doesn't. Try it.
Yes, it does, then there won't.
I said try it.
Hey, it doesn't taste fishy. I wonder why.
It's a veal cutlet, you asshole. Try it.
No, I don't. Hey, this doesn't taste fishy, asshole. I wonder why.
Hi, asshole. Take 4.
Will you just try it?
Hey, it doesn't taste fishy. I wonder why.
It's a veal cutlet, you dumb shit.